All right, guys, so when I took off the kickstand, I noticed that there's no bushing in here. This hole is really oversized and it just had this skinny little bolt. So what was happening was, this was also really bent out. The ears were bent out. I just straightened it on the vise with the hammer and it seems a lot better so far. So what was happening was the kickstand was wobbling so much that I couldn't get it to stay in any good position. So now as I keep tightening this and I make up a little bushing, I'm gonna make up this little piece of aluminum. I'll pop it in the lathe, just mill it down slightly, and then slide it in there. And then what I have for the bolt is just a countersunk headed bolt, and I'm gonna fit it in here like this. And it should look pretty good. I might just put a slight weld on the back, just a little tap to keep the nut from coming off. All right, so this is what we came up with. Made this little bushing, a nice tight fit right in that hole, and a very tight fit in between here. I just have to press it in a little bit, do that off camera. This is our bolt. You slide it through and put back the spring. And see how it goes. All right, got everything back together. It's now nice and tight, as you can see. My only problem is that when I come up with it, it's actually hitting the swing arm. So what I need to do is build up some weld right in here. I need to bring it down about 1/4 of an inch to get it to stop, something like that. And then my other problem is I'm gonna end up being about 4 inches too short. When I come down, I want the bike to sit right around there, and I go all the way down to there. Just so you have an idea. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's got a serious lean to it. Repairs on the XR200 is the Kickstarter. Luckily the detent ball, I don't know if you guys can see that, is still in there. And what's happening is it wore out the face of the bracket here. The shaft that goes through it is either worn out, or the holes in the kickstart lever or the bracket are worn out. So I'm going to see if I can drill it one size larger and pin it back together. It might be okay. I might have to weld some of this back up and make a new little indent for the ball. Also notice that when I'm kicking it, it's going past perpendicular to the bike to here. So I'm gonna have to build this up with weld and then grind it flat again. All right, I got the Kickstarter on the bench. I thought this was pretty funny by Honda, letting us know that it's a Kickstarter. So as I showed you guys before, this is the part that's worn out. But I believe right now you can really see it. You can see the detent fall in there. Should have a little spring inside. I might have to replace that, or like I said, just weld this up, grind it back down. My main concern though is this wobble. That's what's causing me all the headaches. I'm going to see, once I get this pin out, I'll either make a new pin, a little oversized, bore these out, next drill bit size larger, or if I can't do that, then I'll have to weld up the holes and re-drill. Alright, I got lucky with the bracket. I was able to drill this out, and as you can see, it's much thicker. So I just drilled it one size larger than it was. I did not get as lucky with this. It's very egg-shaped, as you can see. So my plan is to just weld up both of these holes. I can just about get it in my drill press, and I'm going to drill it back to this size, and then I'll cut up a hole, something like this. I'm not going to use this exact one because I think the threads are a little too deep on this, a little too close to the size. Or I might actually use, I think I have a piece of solid steel bar, maybe 5/16 I might use. Last thing I have to do that's giving me a lot of slop is weld up this recess for the ball detent, machine it flat, and then just mess around with some drill bit tips until I get it where I want. Alright, I chucked up a piece of round bar here, and I measured this just with the dial indicator, nothing crazy. It's like 325 thousandths. I'm going to go a hair smaller than that, and we should be good to go. I'll probably just drill a hole for a cotter pin on one end, and just leave the other end slightly larger, sort of like the head of a bolt. Well, the machined really easy, but I don't know if you guys could see, it left a very grainy surface here. Might actually help to hold a little bit of grease in. Let's see the fit here. Oh man, that's beautiful, guys. That has no play whatsoever. I'm actually pushing and pulling it right now. Hard to show this all on camera, but that's better than I had hoped for. I'll set the distance here. I'll put it all back together. Just going to clean up this end, mill it off, part it off I should say, and then I'll go to the drill press and I'll drill a hole for a cotter pin. Okay, so I got it all back together. You can see I just put the little shim washer right in there. Get this all made up. This was not designed for a hitch pin. I misplaced my cotter pin kit right now. So I just threw a hitch pin in there just to finish it up, put it back on the bike. As soon as I find my cotter pins, or like I usually do, end up buying a new set and then finding the next one, a month down the line, I'll put a cotter pin in this. Because as of right now, if that spins, it might actually start to hit the case. The other thing I'm noticing, and I mean this is 10 times better than it was, the Kickstarter is almost perfectly perpendicular to the bike, maybe just slightly on an angle like this, but that's actually better. So as it wears, I'll have some give to it. Comes back and has a nice click when the ball locks it. Hopefully you guys can hear that. My only problem is that I seem to have a lot of play in the hole that the spring and the ball sit in. And it's almost like the ball is actually not the right size. And that's giving me this play. But all in all, it's 1,000 times better. I'm gonna see if I can order another ball and spring online and try that first. If that doesn't work, I might just weld up that hole and re-drill it and see what that does. All right, moving right along, guys. I have the rear chain slider. This is the inside steel plate, looks pretty good. There was no plastic guide at all, or slide I should say. On this bike, it has metal on both sides, and then it just has the guide along the bottom here, and the chain kind of just sits right on top of it. As the chain wears, it seems to make a little groove, so the chain stays straight in the middle. Mine, as you could tell, is completely mangled, pretty much like that. I'm going to straighten it out as best I can on here. I had the 2 original bolts, obviously, holding it to the bike. I do not have these 2 metric screws. So, what I'm gonna do is, I found these 2 Allens that are 1/4 20. Probably gonna be too long, I'll just cut them down a little bit, but definitely good enough for this. I'm gonna see if I can weld up these nuts, probably 8mm if I had to guess. I'll just weld them up from both sides, re-drill them, and tap them for 1/4 20. This should be good to go. Oh, and a piece of plastic I found. Seems to be some black phenolic or something like that. Delrin maybe, I have no idea. It's not quite wide enough for these 2 holes. So, if I'm going to be cutting and re-welding anyway, I might just move this hole inboard a little bit. And then what I'll do is probably cut this in half, stack them both together, drill 2 holes. I also have on this bike something interesting. This was done before I bought it. It's a 530 chain to put on here. I'm not sure why. Seems to ride okay. It does have a lot of slop on the rear sprocket though. I might change it back at some point, but for now it's good. They also extended the swing arm about 2 inches. Not the worst job I've ever seen. The welds look okay. They just used something smaller than the diameter of the swing arm. Might be solid bar actually. I'm not really positive, but it gives it a really nice stance with the KTM White Power front end, which I believe is off like 85, 86 KTM 250. And it raised the bike around 8 inches, hence why I had to add to the kickstand. It didn't reach the floor, unfortunately. I'm not sure if this is the original shock or not. I believe it is, or maybe they switched it to an xr200r shock or something like that, because I weigh about 240 pounds and I mostly do trail riding, but the suspension feels pretty good. All right, I think that's as good as I'm gonna get it. Might just mess with that little tiny bit more, but it's not really that much of a concern for me. This is, however, there's a crack right here. I'm just gonna put some weld on this, grind it down. I'll leave the back the way it is, and this edge is fine. We'll get it back together. All right, so it's definitely not pretty, guys. To do stuff like this, you gotta set the MIG on basically the lowest setting that you have. I gave it a little tiny bit of preheat with the MAP gas torch. I'll see if I can flip this over. It's still kind of hot. All right, you can see I just kept doing little tiny tacks, both sides. Kind of straightened it out a little bit while it was hot. I built up a lot of weld here on the edge. That seems to be the definite weak point. Woo! All right, so I'm just gonna take the grinder now and slowly grind this down to look nice. Grind down the inside just enough to make up the pieces of plastic. All right, so this is about as far as I'm gonna go with the grinding. I left this built up edge, like I said before. This is actually the outside. Inside came out pretty good, definitely good enough to not be seen. That's gonna go like that. And then, as you can see by these green dots, I marked where I'm gonna drill the new holes. I just brought them in a 1/2 inch, and now I could get 2 holes through my block. And then I'm gonna weld up these 2 holes and should be done. So I figured out why there was no plastic slide on the bottom. When they put the 530 chain on, the chain guide didn't fit. So they just pulled out the slide, pulled out the bolts, and bent it out so that they could ride the bike. So what I have to do for now, at least until I get the right chain, or you know, sometimes these temporary fixes stay for 20 years. I have these little oilite and graphite impregnated bushings. I had a ton of them left over from a project I did years ago. So I just mounted it in the lathe and I trimmed it down a little bit, and these should be perfect to give me that little extra spacing for the 530 chain. Right, I got the plastic in there as good as it's gonna get. Got to make up a little spacer in the back here and cut down these bolts. Other than that, it's pretty much done. Got my top spacers in. And next step on the bike. I left this hole for now. This isn't a restoration, so I don't see any point in welding it up and getting crazy. Once I get my vapor blast cabinet done, I'll throw it in there, and then I'll probably spruce it up a little bit when I do the full restoration of the bike.